I'm making this video to try and highlight how the issues of mass immigration and migration under the guise of refugee and humanitarian responsibilities has affected social cohesion in the UK, and how, more importantly, Australia is on point or on fast track towards the same problems that are plaguing Britain right now. We're already witnessing gangs are growing, the gang violence, the knife crime, the other crimes rising exponentially. And you must be blind if you cannot see physically where and who these crimes are being predominantly perpetrated by. Now for a warning. I'm going to start in a few moments with a man talking about the results of the Islamic grooming gang inquiry in the UK. Some of the information that came to light is confronting. And I've had to censor some words because YouTube has been deleting these videos, even though they're truthful fact, where people have been discussing the inquiry results because it's talking about the vicious raping, for want of a better word that won't get me banned, of children and how it was allowed to continue for so long by the authorities. Tell me in the comments whether you believe Australia needs to put a stop to this issue before it gets out of hand like it has in the UK. And believe me, when you see the figures and the statistical data that I'm going to show you, you will realise it has already started here. But it's up to us how far we let it go. Are we going to just sit back and allow the governments to willingly import the same issues as UK, France, Germany, Belgium, and the same issues that so many other countries have allowed to come in, that have put women, children, Jews and Christians at so much risk in these other nations? The same issues or the demographic of them that has caused the crime rates to jump sky high in those nations is coming here, is growing here in our nation.
UK grooming gang inquiry has finally been released. It's 219 pages. It details 250,000 primarily white girls being groomed and raped, at least from 2000 to 2016. Now, we know this was happening in the 90s, and we know it's still happening today. People were estimating that the number of victims could have been 1 million. Now, not all of those are citizens of the United Kingdom. This sexual abuse, this grooming, this financial control, this drug abuse was happening in 149 different districts in the United Kingdom, and the victims were not being listened to. Police, social services, and national health services prioritized community relations and avoided racism, so they just wouldn't arrest these men. They didn't want to open that can of worms. But what you will read in this report and from the victims themselves is some of the worst shit that's humanly imaginable. Whatever you thought you were going to find in the Jeffrey Epstein files is here in these reports. One case report from 2025 stated that a disproportionate number of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds, if you're American, this means Middle Eastern people or Arabs and Persians, were the ones responsible for the grooming gangs and mass rape. Now we know the number, 87 to 95%. The perpetrators were Pakistani, Somali, Iranian, Syrian, Turkish, Kurdish, and other migrant ethnic origins. 90% of those convicted had Middle Eastern names. A similar conclusion was reached almost a decade ago by the Quilliam Foundation, a moderate Muslim think tank that no longer exists. The report says the vast majority of these men involved in the gangs were never convicted. These people are still walking the streets in the United Kingdom right now. These men did some of the most harrowing and brutal things that you could describe. I'm not sure that TikTok will allow me to talk about it, but Instagram and Twitter will. Involving multiple men, forced insertion of baseball bats into a woman's rectum. Few victims described red rooms and daily rape, which was filmed and later shown to them to humiliate them. They were pissed on and beaten. The National Health Service recorded sexually transmitted infections in 13-year-olds. 13-year-olds being impregnated by these grooming gangs. These grooming gangs would target children's houses or orphanages. So they were actually looking for people who had been victims of abuse and neglect already. These rape and suicide attempts would be dismissed from hospitals and from the police and given back to the people that were raping them. The victims described being ignored by law enforcement and by the councils. When they brought up that they were being raped by Muslim groups, they were given advice on sexual health and birth control. Some victims in a local area described a sex room in a school. When they brought this up, they were mocked. They were called liars. They said this was insane. When Keir Starmer was the director of public prosecutions in the United Kingdom, 13,000 and pedophiles that were part of these gangs were let off with warnings into the British public.
So let's look at it. We've just seen that video. Now in Australia, Women of Islamic faith have a total fertility rate, or a TFR, of approximately 3.03 births per woman, resulting in an average family size of around 3 children. We do see many Islamic families with much more than that. The more money you get off the government, for the more children you have. And it's a lot higher than the TFR of 2.6 in the UK, and it's 2.9 total fertility rate in France. Now, looking at the demographic growth, the Muslim community in Australia is growing rapidly. Nearly 1 million people, or 3.2% to 3.7% of the total population, positioning Australia at a growth stage that directly lags behind the UK by roughly 15 to 20 years. So in 15 to 20 years' time, maybe sooner, if we continue the way we're going, Australia will be living what Britain is now. We will see what we're seeing on the streets in cities and towns across Great Britain. We will see it here in Australia. And we need to understand that it may say that they converge because the communities integrate, but we're seeing in England that they're not integrating, they're not assimilating. They're forming their own demographic areas where there's even white people can't go, even Westerners can't go in these areas. Now, the estimated total fertility rate, approximate average family size in the general national population, we see Australia has 3.03 births per woman, or 3 children of Islamic families. The United Kingdom has 2.6 births per woman, or 2 to 3 children, and France has 2.9 births per woman, or 3 children again. Demographers track minority population growth through total percentages and community infrastructure. Based on the historical data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the UK Office for National Statistics, Australia's Muslim population is tracking at a baseline established in the UK nearly 2 decades ago. The UK's stage, past versus present, which you'll see all these information graphs coming up on the screen throughout this video. In 2001, Muslims made up roughly 3% of the UK population. By the 2021 UK census, that figure doubled to 6.7%, about 3.8 million people, 3.8 million Muslims it had grown to in 2021 in the UK. Now, Australia's current stage of this, we see that the 2021 Australian census recorded Muslims at a 3.2% of the population, or 813,392 people. Current 2026 demographic projections place the community at approximately 3.7% to 4% of the national population. Australia is currently navigating the exact demographic tier the UK experienced in the early 2000s. We're just a bit behind the UK, because the UK was closer to these countries that these people come from. Now, both nations share identical vectors accelerating this population growth stage. Let's call it the youth bulge. In Australia, 62% of Muslims are under the age of 35, compared to roughly 43% of the broader population. This mirrors Europe and the UK, where the median age of Muslims is significantly younger than the national average age, ensuring that sustained natural growth as a large bracket enters prime childbearing years. Not to mention that the ones coming in are predominantly young, fighting-aged men between the ages of 18 and 35. Just as the UK experienced large migration waves from the South Asian region, Australia's growth is heavily supplemented by immigration from South Asia, which is Pakistan and Bangladesh, from the Middle East, and from parts of Africa. And the geographic distribution of Muslim populations differs sharply between Australia and the UK, moving from extreme duopoly in Australia to a multi-centric regional spread in the UK. While Australia's Islamic population is concentrated almost entirely within its two largest economic engines, the UK's population is dispersed across several major historical industrial hubs. Okay, so let's look at the duopoly versus the regional spread of this. Australia is highly centralised. Greater Sydney and Greater Melbourne house over 83% of Australia's total Muslim population. Outside of these two capital cities, Muslim communities drop off dramatically, leaving states like Queensland, where I am, South Australia and Western Australia with relatively small or sparse populations. Now, the UK is multi-centric. London holds only about 34% of the UK's total Muslim population, and that's still a lot for one city. The remaining two-thirds are heavily distributed across independent, massive regional hubs in the West Midlands, which is 14.7%, the North West, which is 14.6%, and predominantly Yorkshire as well. Now, the density profiles of the cities where these communities reside look very different because of the underlying scales of the populations. Australia is hyper-concentrated in two gateways. Sydney, 6.3%, holds 42% of Australia's Muslims. Melbourne, at 5.3%, holds 41% of Australian Muslims. The rest of Australia holds about 17%. The United Kingdom, decentralised regional hubs, Greater London holds 15%. So Australia's top hubs in Greater Sydney, Muslims make up 63.3% of the city, and in Greater Melbourne they make up 5.3%. In the UK's top hubs, in London, Muslims take up roughly 15% of the city's population. However, regional cities have far higher total densities than any city in Australia. For instance, Muslims make up roughly 30% of the entire population in both Birmingham and Bradford. Australia's dispersed concentrations at a micro-sub level, Australian Muslim communities are largely dispersed. Lakemba in Sydney is the only suburb in the country where Muslims constitute more than 50% of the local population. Even in high concentration suburbs across Sydney's west or Melbourne's north, the population is heavily mixed with other diverse migrant communities. Now, the UK's enclave pockets, due to post-World War II migration into textile mill towns, the UK features deeply defined high-density municipal enclaves. Entire wards, sections of cities, or distinct towns such as Seville Town in Dewsbury, or deep pockets of Blackburn, Oldham and Luton are almost entirely Muslim. And we will see that here in that 15 to 20 years maximum. And the divergence comes down to economic history here. The UK Muslims population grew from post-war labour migration, recruited directly into provincial manufacturing, textile and industrial towns across the Midlands and the North. Australia's growth is tied to modern, skilled humanitarian and family immigration pathways, drawing people directly to the two massive service and finance economies of Sydney and Melbourne. Based on current demographic trends and growth patterns, Australia will reach a comparable Muslim population percentage to that of the contemporary UK, approximately 6.5 to 6.7%, in roughly 1.5 to 2.5 decades, 15 to 25 years, placing the milestone between the years 2041 and 2051. But it may be sooner if it keeps going the way it's going. A structural and mathematical breakdown explains this timeline. The UK baseline is that 2021 UK census recorded Muslim population at about 6.7%, 3.8 billion. Over the last several census cycles, the Muslim community has consistently trended as one of Australia's fastest growing demographics, and that pleases Labor. And the historical pace is between 2011 and 2021. The community grew from 2.25% to 3.2% of the whole national population of Australia. That's an increase of nearly 1 percentage point per decade. The projected acceleration, because the community is highly concentrated in prime childbearing brackets, 62% being under the age of 35, and heavily supplemented by skilled and humanitarian migration from South Asia and Middle East, this growth rate is compounding. Plus, our current government allowing an easy pathway for family and extended family from these other regions to come into Australia. Now, let's look at Australia's projected timeline. 2021, 3.2% of the total population. 2026, prediction of 3.7 to 4% of the total population. 2036 projected is 5 to 5.3% of the total population. 2046 projected is 6.5 to 6.8, which is UK's equivalency. A standard linear progression of roughly 1.1 to 1.3 percentage points of total population share added per decade. Australia will hit the 6.5% mark in approximately 18 to 22 years. And demographic modelling relies on current immigration policies remaining steady. The exact year Australia hits this UK equivalent stage depends heavily on two primary engines. One is the net overseas migration, or the NOM. Migration is the single largest accelerator at present. If future Australian governments significantly lower overall migration caps, the timeline will stretch closer to 25 years, which is the mid-2050s. Conversely to that, high intakes from key Southeast Asian hubs like Pakistan, currently Australia's fastest growing Islamic migration corridor, and one that is also dominating other Western cities like Bradford, Birmingham and Luton in the UK, Portugal, Montreal, parts of Oslo in Norway, as well as selected districts in New York City and Houston, will accelerate the timeline toward a 15-year, which, in other words, 2030s. Now, look at videos online, do some searches for Islamic, Indian, or Pakistani, Bangladeshi regions and cities growing in the US. There are quite a few of them. Now, Australia is replicating the exact structural growth curve that the UK went through between 95 and 2020. And I will keep saying that through this video to try and get you to understand we are headed the same as what we see in the UK now, where jihadists are now hunting down patriotic British people and killing them on the streets. We're seeing knife attacks daily in some cities in the UK. And at our current trajectories, Australia will possess a demographic profile matching the UK by the mid-late 2040s at the latest. And as the Muslim demographic in the UK climbed towards and surpassed the 6% national threshold, both the political landscape and the urban infrastructure experienced high visible structural shifts in both of those. And what I mean by that is historically British Muslims were one of the most reliable voting blocs for the centre-left Labor Party. And they are for the massive left and the centre-left Labor Party here in Australia, with support in the UK hovering between 80% and 85%. Now, this alliance was forged through working class alignment, inner city industrial employment, and Labor's anti-discrimination platforms. Now, during this stage, the Muslim vote was largely managed via biradari networks, traditional South Asian clan or kinship structures, where community elders mobilised entire blocks behind local Labor candidates. And we're starting to see that here as well. But it will get worse. As the demographic footprint expanded and a highly educated, politically active second or third generation in the UK came of age, the relationship with Labor fractured over foreign and domestic policy. The first major fracture occurred during the 2003 Iraq War under Tony Blair. However, the defining institutional shift occurred in 2024 UK general election, right as the demographics stabilised at that 6.5% mark. And we're seeing much the same today. We're seeing that the Radical Greens Party in Australia have some Islamic, or had some Islamic members or candidates, which have now broken away, and the same with some from Labor. have broken away from those parties, and they're talking about starting their own Islamic party because they know they're getting the numbers here to be able to bring in more and more Islamic people into our parliaments.
Brothers and my sisters in Islam, victory is coming. And you and I, inshallah, because we love Allah and we love His Prophet, we are on that path to victory. Where we're going to civilizational struggle, where we're going to see Islam dominate. Where we're going to see Islam bring about justice to every corner.
Now, grassroots groups launched the Muslim Vote campaign in the UK. They explicitly announced that Muslim support could no longer be taken for granted by any of the major parties. That's the same here in Australia. We are already seeing this play out in Australia with some Islamic politicians who fractured from their left-wing parties, which I just mentioned. In 2024, the campaign successfully took 5 historical safe seats away from Labor by backing pro-Palestine independent candidates or the Green Party. That would be devastating in Australia. It was devastating for the UK. Look what's happening there now. It's also drastically slashed the majorities of senior Labor cabinet members in the high-density Muslim areas like Birmingham and Bradford. Now, with Muslims composing up to 30% of the population in specific regional cities in the UK, local ward elections began featuring candidates campaigning explicitly on faith-centric or foreign policy issues. Okay, so these candidates were not talking about local issues. They were not talking about fixing the local roads and things like that. They were talking about things that are happening in overseas, like the Palestine conflict, the Ukraine conflict, things like that, which shouldn't matter to local parliamentary candidates. This shifted prompt warnings from political commentators regarding the rise of sectarian voting patterns, while simultaneously resulting in the most ethnically and religiously diverse parliament in British history. Now, when a minority community reaches a significant demographic, as it has in the UK, as it is in Australia, concentration within specific geographic zones, cities naturally adjust their infrastructure to accommodate their unique cultural and religious needs. Just as Australia and Britain were raised on Christian principles, we're now seeing Christian churches being taken over as mosques and things like that. And we might not all be Christians, but we need to understand that Christian rule, Christian morality has done our country's well. And the UK education system, we can't forget the education system. In the UK, it allows faith schools to receive state funding. As the demographic expanded, a significant push led to the creation of state-funded Islamic schools alongside traditional Catholic and Church of England schools. Famous examples like the Tahidul Islamic Girls High School in Blackburn, and now in mainstream state schools within high-density municipal boroughs like Tower Hamlets in London or parts of Birmingham. Infrastructure adjusted to offer halal-only school menus, regardless if there were predominantly non-Muslim students. In other words, they were pandering more to the minority Muslim students, and every other student had to deal with that. They had to have the halal foods. They were given dedicated prayer spaces and restructured physical education policies to accommodate modest uniforms. That I don't mind about. I don't mind modest uniforms. But we're seeing with the trans community and the Muslim community, the government seem to be pandering more and more to them to change things for them, stuff everyone else's ideas, their ideologies, their worldview, their faith, anything like that, stuff that these are the groups that we have to pander to, and the governments are doing that. Now, traditional British high streets in areas like Sparkbrook, which is in Birmingham, or Green Street, which is in London, underwent complete commercial rezoning to suit the Islamic people. Traditional pubs, bookmakers, conventional butchers, all systematically closed, replaced by specialised shisha lounges, modernist fashion retailers, halal supermarkets, and Sharia-compliant financial institutions. So you imagine, most major cities in Australia have a little Chinatown, which is great. But you imagine these little Chinatowns style, but little Islamic towns popping up, not just in one place in a city, but everywhere, all over the place. In the UK, there was local councils were increasingly adjusting urban zoning laws to permit the conversion of old, abandoned industrial warehouses, textile mills, and even Christian churches into large-scale Islamic community centres, marriage halls, and specialised funeral homes equipped for traditional Islamic ritual washing, or the ghusl, I think it is, GHUSL. The architectural shift is that early British mosques were sort of the back of house conversions, unremarkable terraced houses or old churches where they used a room in the house. As the community gained critical mass and wealth, local city councils approved planning permissions for large, custom-built landmark mosques featuring traditional minarets and the big domes. You know the big domes you see, such as the Cambridge Central Mosque or the East London Mosque, reshaping the visual skyline of the British towns. If you thought seeing solar panel farms and windmills, massive windmills everywhere, was bad, wait till you go into any city or any town and you see these big minarets and domes of the mosques everywhere. Because that's what's happening in the UK. Reshaping the visual skyline of Australia and British towns. We don't want that. Acoustic and parking regulations are also in question because the higher population density forced the councils in England to negotiate specific local planning laws. For example, while the traditional local call to prayer, or the adhan, is generally restricted outdoors in the UK due to noise ordinances, some councils have pandered and they've granted specific timed allowances for special holidays alongside strict sort of traffic management system for Friday afternoon prayers. Some towns in the UK, the Muslims close down complete streets in these towns, in these small towns even, just so they can get out with their prayer mats and kneel to Mecca and pray on the streets, which they don't care if they disrupt every other society around them, every other person around them. Even the data in this video acknowledges that fertility rates tend to converge downward over time, but when Islamic hadith strongly urges Muslims to marry loving and fertile women, for I will boast of your great numbers before the nations, to me that sort of spells it out. Islam grows by birth rate much higher, much faster than it grows by conversion. And even if migration settles down, birth rate will still grow. Massive birth rate will still grow. Islam fast. Now, Islam doesn't allow women to go and willingly abort their children, their unborn children, just on a whim like we do, like Westerners do. We make laws that allow women to make decisions that are detrimental to our future population growth, with thousands of abortions every year for no other reason than a form of birth control. Or, I've decided I don't want a kid, but you still go out there and you still get pregnant. Now, we're instructing our law enforcement to favour some selected demographics over national citizens, and we have woke, wet-back governments who bring back radicalised people like the ISIS brides and their offspring, who are taught from a very young age to hate and despise Westerners. And finally, we're stupid enough to empower those who live in fantasy land to have the upper hand over those who believe truth matters and that biological sex is binary and immutable. See, we're assisting in our own downfall by allowing all this sort of fantasy land and these ideologies, we are causing our own downfall. We are ruining our own nation by allowing it. And we are the only ones who can stand up for that. So the real question for Australia is not, will one group take over? The real question that needs to be asked is, what kind of nation does Australia want to be in 20, 30, 50 years' time? If Australians are concerned over the speed of demographic change, there are lawful policy levers governments can consider without specifically appearing to be targeting any religion or ethnicity. Now, these include reviewing our overall migration intake. There's a couple of parties that are actually speaking about that now. Even the Liberal National Party, Angus Taylor, he is speaking about that now, which is good to see. Tightening extended family visa pathways, especially to some regions around the world. I spoke about that earlier. Prioritising skilled migration tied to labour shortages and to be proven to be skilled, and not with the false degrees and diplomas that we see is happening from Indians or from Indian nations currently all around the world. We're seeing people coming in with visas because they're skilled, but a lot of their paperwork is forged. So they're not really skilled. They come in and they do menial jobs so they can get into the country. We need to improve integration, assimilation, and civic education. As Angus Taylor said on the news yesterday, if someone comes to Australia or wants to come to Australia and they don't want to conform to our ideals, the Australian way of life, then don't bother coming. Or if you're on a visa and you don't want to sort of conform to Australian ways, then get sent home. Supporting Australian families who want children through housing and supporting them first, because charity starts at home. We're in Australia. Charity starts with Australians, not with offering first home buyers scheme to immigrants who aren't even Australian citizens. And we need affordability, we need tax relief, and we need childcare support. Because here's something people are often ignoring. If native-born Australians continue delaying marriage, they continue having fewer children because of the economy, and they're struggling with housing costs, demographic change will happen regardless of which migrant group arrives. In other words, this is not only about immigration and Islamic birth rates. It's also about whether Australians are building families at the sustainable levels. A nation's future is shaped not by just who comes in, but by what those already here choose to build. What do you choose to build? Australia still has time to shape its future wisely. Not much time looking at how we are in relation to Britain and its decline, but we still have some time. And good policy requires calm thinking, honest data, and long-term vision, not fear, panic, or hostility. Because once public debate becomes driven by division or diversion, we see everybody lose. And the challenge for Australia is preserving national identity, shared values, and social cohesion. We keep getting told about social cohesion by the government politicians, but we need to remain fair, lawful, and stable. And that requires decent leadership, not that gutless, spineless coward we have as our Prime Minister at the moment. And it requires Australians to decide what kind of country they want to leave for the next generation. Now, this conversation cannot be just about the numbers, about the migration or birth rates or demographics. Because whether you like it or not, whether you believe in God or not, Scripture teaches us that the greatest threat to a nation is not always what comes from outside. Often it's what's already decayed inside, what we've allowed to decay inside. And the rot comes from the top. Before judgment came from outside, compromise had already entered within. Idolatry came first. Moral collapse came first. Spiritual weakness came first. Then came the false religions with immoral but allegedly perfect prophets who marry 6-year-old little girls in order for their followers to emulate their perfectness. then comes the consequences. Australia needs to hear this. If Australia is worried about losing its identity, we must first ask, A, what identity are we talking about? Was it economic prosperity? Was it Western culture? Or was it the Christian foundations that once shaped this nation? Australia was built upon biblical principles, whether you like it or not. Truth, personal responsibility, family structure, justice, and reverence for God. But for decades now, this nation has sort of pushed God further and further out. Prayer's been removed from schools. Christianity is not allowed on many streets or outside many places like abortion clinics for fear of hurting feelings or offending the thin skin. But Islam can stop traffic on major roadways just to bow to a false god, and they get allowed to do it. We've got Islamic hate preachers in Australia preaching their hate, but they're still allowed to stay here.
That's right. I had some Tuckers, they'll come to work for me a couple of months ago. They're going to be coming, some new ones are coming now to work for me soon. We're going to pick them up for about 20 quid a day. Yeah? They came to work for me and they were in the garden. I don't offer none of my food. I sat there in my kitchen, I was eating my chande masala and my rice and that. I'm not going to give them none of my food. But Rasulullah said, do not let anybody enter your home but a Muslim. Do not let anybody enter your home but a Muslim, or eat from your food but a Muslim. He come to work for me, come to do my gardening for me. He said, if he comes to work for you, treat him like your slave. Words of Rasulullah. He said, treat him like your slave. So they, wait, do that job. Wait, you missed a spot over there. That's it. Carry on. Look at him like that. That's it. Al-Islam ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh. And the Muslim is superior, and the Kafir is always inferior.
We're seeing church attendance collapsing. We're seeing biblical truth being mocked. Marriage is being weakened and families fractured due to the growth of other ideologies that don't align with Islam, that seem to favour Islam over Christianity, even under the threat of death. Many have heard of the Islamic throwing certain groups from the tall buildings principle. And these groups still trying to align themselves with Islam when they're the first ones who will go under Sharia, under Islamic law. And children are being raised without faith these days. They're being told that they can do and be whatever they want to be, if not in biological reality or even reality at all. And when they do, they don't need to take responsibility for their actions. That's what the kids are getting taught in school. And there is a deeper crisis. It's easy to point at immigration and say, that's the problem. The Christians must be honest as well. A spiritually empty nation will always be vulnerable to being reshaped by stronger, more oppressive, more dominant, albeit violent belief systems. And here's something many don't want to admit. Islam grows not only because Muslims have children or migrate here, it also grows because much of the West no longer believes in anything strongly enough to defend it. Muslims believe in their faith strongly enough to defend it and to live it, whereas Western nations are going the totally opposite way. And no wonder we're declining our own gene lines, we're declining our own nations, and we're virtually handing them over to places or things like Islamic rule. Nature hates a vacuum. When truth leaves, something else fills that space. The answer then is not hatred. The answer is not fear. The answer is certainly not hostility towards your ordinary Muslim people who, like all people, are made in the image of God and need the gospel of Jesus Christ. The church must remember this. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. It is spiritual. As Ephesians 6 says, we wrestle against principalities, powers, and spiritual darkness. Islam is a spiritual darkness. But a lot of Aussies, secular Aussies, can't see that. So what do? Yes, nations have a right to wise borders, prudent migration policy, and social stability. Governments must govern wisely. We're not seeing that in many of the Western nations at the moment. But political solutions alone cannot save a spiritually dying nation. And that's what we are. We don't see Christians out in the street praying for people. We don't see Christians out in the street doing good deeds for people, because they're more interested in their own, feathering their own nest, so to speak. If Australia wants renewal, then the answer begins here. Parents raising children in truth, not pandering to lies and empowering children to lie, as is happening now without parents knowing. In schools, the kids are being taught, you can be whatever you want to be. Don't tell your parents. We won't tell your parents that you want to sort of go down this psychological path, mental illness path. So you don't have to either. We can do this without them. We need men leading families in righteousness. We need churches preaching the full counsel of God without compromise. Churches need to stop pandering and bowing to minority ideologies as well, just to be the popular kid in town. We need to follow Scripture. For Christians, Scripture should be non-negotiable. This Bible should be non-negotiable for Christians. If displaying the rainbow at church, then do it as God's promise, not as gay pride. Because remember, there are consequences. And Christians refusing silence. Don't stay silent. You need to preach. You need to tell people of your love for Jesus Christ. So perhaps the real question here isn't, will Australia be changed by outside influences? The real question might be, has Australia already surrendered from within, from weak, spineless, woke, secular politicians? Because if the church sleeps, darkness advances. We're seeing that. But if God's people humble themselves, pray, seek his face, and turn from the wicked ways, as promised in 2 Chronicles 7 verse 14, God still heals nations. Australia's future will not ultimately be decided by demographics alone. It will be shaped by whether this nation returns to God. And that starts with you, with me, with every Christian. We are the body of Christ. And Christians can get this nation back on track again, away from the dark, false ideologies that are taking lives all around the world, taking Christian lives, taking Jewish lives all around the world, because they think they are powerful. I'm sorry this video's dragged on a bit. I hope all the graphics in it have given you a bit more insight to what I've been saying. And if you'd like it, please hit the thumbs up, please share, please subscribe, because I want to do more videos like this on topics that need to be discussed in Australia, because there's not many people doing it. We're not seeing politicians speaking the truth to us, but I will always do it. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, but if you're not Christian, then I will always do this from a Christian perspective as well. So, love everyone, but with not their sin. I love all my brothers and sisters. I know Muslims. I know some really nice Muslims. But I also know that the ideology, if it calls on them to act a certain way, they are so ingrained in that ideology in every part of their life that they will follow regardless. Now, because remember, we are seeing these hate preachers, Islamic hate preachers in these mosques around Australia, but it's every single member of that congregation that is allowing them to speak and preach their hate and their violence. And that makes every single one of those Muslims complicit, because that is what they're taught. Follow what the person up front says, regardless. If it's come from the Imam or someone like that, then it must be right. We have to follow it. And that is dangerous for Westerners. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you've gained some knowledge on the growth of Islam in Australia compared, and how we are with the rate it is in England at this point, where we're seeing the streets being overrun. Violence, stabbings every day. We're seeing young people like Henry Novak, killed. But that wasn't by Muslims, that was by Sikhs. That's another story about people allowed to carry weapons where normal Australians aren't. So I'll be discussing that next. Bless you.